Good evening, everybody. I have a statement to read before the meeting. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded and audio streamed via the Council's website. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public may have to leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. The Guildhall voting system is not currently operational, so any votes will be taken by roll call or general assent. Please remember to switch on your mics when speaking and voting. Apologies.
We have apologies from Councillor David Thomas and Councillor Elizabeth Carr-Ellis.
Do we have any substitutes?
We do. We have Councillor Robert Jones for Councillor Thomas.
Declarations of interest by councillors or officers?
None received in advance. Are there any from the floor? No.
We have minutes of the previous meeting. These are just for...
To be received.
Because it was the last minutes from 2021, 4th of March 2021, and nobody's here. Okay.
Because there hasn't been a formal meeting of this subcommittee since the 4th of March 2021. So that's the last set of minutes to be received. So hence we're receiving them, but we can't actually comment on them since I don't think any of us were there.
Okay, thank you. We move to item 5, the South Canterbury planning update. In the future, going forward, we're going to call it the Mountfield Park update, just so because South Canterbury is quite a big area, basically, and I think it would make more sense to call it Mountfield Park. I'm going to ask Andrew Gambrell to introduce his report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So as you know, just a brief background, the permission was granted in June 2023, following kind of committee resolution in the December 2022. At that committee meeting in the December, there was a resolution by the members at that time that the kind of the progress of the development would be monitored through the planning subcommittee, kind of on a pretty much 6-monthly basis, depending on whether or not there were updates at the time, and it was agreed with the chair. Because of the only very recent grant, really, so in the last year, there hasn't actually been much in the way of, well, there hasn't been any submission to date. So actually, at this moment in time, there isn't necessarily kind of anything to monitor because we're still waiting for kind of future submissions, both in the form of conditions, but also the elements of the Section 106 agreement that was secured as part of the planning permission. Just kind of to really, I suppose, set out how it's likely to work moving forwards. At this moment in time, there hasn't been much movement just simply because of how early we are in the process. But typically what we'd expect in the next, I don't know, however long, we would kind of get the archaeological details, those initial details, we'd get kind of details around ecological mitigation. So the applicant, well, the developer at the moment is kind of carrying out various ecological surveys to kind of inform, you know, a submission at a later date. And that will also then in turn start to inform like design code submissions, for instance, on each of the strategic phases that come forward, because they've got, you know, the ecological background to things, the archaeological background to things. So when those submissions are made, those are the types of things that will be reported to the planning subcommittee when we next meet, and we'll be able to obviously update at that time on kind of the outcome of the conditions following consultation with the experts at KCC, for instance, on ecology and what have you. And it's very much kind of a similar vein for the Section 106 obligations as well, in the sense that a lot of those, the triggers for those are typically prior to commencement, and because we're not quite at that stage yet, we haven't had anything through. So when they do come through, they'll be reported to the planning subcommittee as part of the update report. But just for today, it was really to set the scene, kind of moving forwards, really, as to what to expect.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you for that. I just wondered whether this committee, is it just that officers will report to this committee, or will this committee have any scrutiny or decision-making over any of those reserved matters or Section 106 agreements? Do we have any power, or is it just for information?
I'll let Simon respond to that.
Thanks, Chair. No, this committee doesn't have any decision-making power at all. But the decision-making power is as usual with the planning committee. So if there's an application made and then it gets called in or reported for any other reason to the planning committee, then obviously that committee makes a decision. And actually it's quite important that this committee doesn't prejudice itself in terms of any future applications that you might be considering at the planning committee meeting subsequently. So it very much is observation, a report for information, and also, you might have some questions about the facts, but it's important that we don't enter into any debate over what should or shouldn't happen on the site. That's definitely a matter for planning committee. I think the other thing to say is that the applicant is in contact with the ward councillors, so there's a lot of information which is passed to and from the developer, so the ward councillors are able to raise their concerns that residents have raised with the developer, and then the developer is able to inform the councillors what's happening at any particular stage.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I've been called worse, Councillor Jones. That's fine. Can I?
Joe, sorry, yeah.
I'm not.
It's Welsh.
Yeah, they're probably related, mate, somewhere down the line. From poor him. Anyway, I was just going to ask. I'm not to have a debate or anything. Just purely on reading the document and how they're going to manage. For example, we mentioned ecology. For example, how part of the site where they're going to remove the wastewater, like rainwater, not of sewage water. It's going to then be sort of looked at, and then it'll end up in a little tributary river, what finally ends up into the Stour. My question is really, how do they monitor that? How is that going to be? Would that be monitored in the future? And unfortunately, if there is an issue, would be an issue, how would they mitigate that to stop? Obviously, that if they found there was significant pollution for whatever reason, how would they mitigate that? How would that be done? I'm not. In this process, how would they come back to do that?
So this was in relation to the wastewater treatment works, is that right? Yeah. So essentially, they've got to submit kind of various detail through condition, which basically sets out how the system's basically going to be implemented. They also have to obviously go through the EA permitting process as well, in the sense that everything they do is controlled through that separate permitting process to ensure it's up to standard. The discharge point, that's obviously kind of, I think I can't remember what the stream's called, the Lamp and Stream. I think the detail around kind of the emergency measures and things would be set within the wastewater treatment works condition that's due to come forward. So it's not, we don't yet know kind of at this stage necessarily exactly how that would operate, but the intention is for that obviously to be safeguarded against those potential pollution events through the submission of that condition. Yeah, and I mean obviously with the EA kind of permitting the wastewater treatment works, it would also then be a responsibility on them as well to kind of monitor any pollution events and things. Yeah, so it's less planning, more an EA kind of, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that's great information for us as councillors, because obviously not that's maybe that specific, but to know that detail, we were able to pass that information off when people asked the question. So yeah, great. Thank you.
Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quickie, really, hopefully. Permission for this project was granted in December 22. The first phase is meant to be underway within 4 years. So they have 2 and a bit years left I just from the introduction, it sounded as if things hadn't actually started yet. So I wondered whether, just in terms of timetable, that you were confident that the various stages will be met.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. So there is a detailed phase to it that has detailed consent, and they have to commence on that within 3 years. I suppose the point I was just making around kind of the details, just that we haven't yet had anything. And typically, you know, you're kind of probably looking at a couple of years really for a site to commence.
So just as a follow up, I mean, so therefore, are you saying you're not concerned at this stage
No,
that they
there's-
won't be able to meet those?
No,
phase-
that's right. There's
those
no
phase
concern.
periods?
There's no concern at this stage in terms of the delivery of the development.
Okay.
It's just, yeah, the way that the kind of the decision notice is set out. It's got the detailed element, has to commence within the 3 years. The reserve matters detail, so that's obviously the rest of the site. There's kind of various triggers for that. So, kind of the first phase, I think they have to make sure the reserve matters are in within the first 4 years, for instance, and that type of thing. So it's staggered. No, we don't. I probably should reiterate. We don't have any concerns with the delivery of the development. It's just that's how it's been approached in the decision notice.
Sorry, Chair, just with clarification, therefore, that's the sort of thing that we should be looking out for in terms of this committee, is how that's progressing, are they on timetable, etc., and that the 106 requirements are being met, and if we have concerns, report to planning, etc. Yeah, yeah.
Are there any more questions at this stage? I mean, I think the point of this that was approved at last full council that this committee would take on this role. Was it last full council or the one before? That this we would have this sort of monitoring and scrutiny ability of this committee to make sure that things were happening when they were supposed to be happening, and it was to give that so that it was, you know, so that the public could hear that things were happening as well. Is there any more questions for Simon at this stage, or Andrew? Okay, so the report is to note, and the note will be by general assent that we will note the report. So is everybody okay with that? Thank you. So we now move on to exclusion of the press and public. State that the report at item 7 is the report at item 7 is confidential because it involves information which reveals that the authority proposes to give under enactment a notice under or a virtue of which requirements are imposed on a person, or make an order or direction under any enactment which is exempt information under paragraph 6 of the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. We propose that the subcommittee resolve that under section 100A4 brackets of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of the following item of business, on the grounds that it would be disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, or the Freedom of Information Act, or both. I seek a seconder. Thank you. Could you do it to the mic, please, Tom?
I would second that, but also for a schedule, not a schedule.
Yes, thank you. And can we take a recorded vote? No, not recorded vote. Can we take a vote by general assent? Thank you.
So that is carried.
So I thank any members. Oh, thank you. Any members of the public? And we now shut down all the streaming services, so you can have a moment.